Hey, how's it going, everybody? This is Chris, and today we are going to set up a project using Gatsby, Contentful, and Netlify. So, the Gatsby Netlify tag team has been an awesome combo for me. Anytime you make a change and push it to your repo on, I use GitHub. It'll automatically reflect those changes and update your website, which is super cool. And now adding Contentful can make it potentially even more user friendly and allow you to work with folks that maybe aren't super technical. So, if you're not familiar with Contentful, it's what's known as a headless CMS, which decouples the development process with the content process. So, if you've ever used something like WordPress, for example, you've probably seen you have the ability to edit the content, but you can also like edit the look and feel. And so um, even when you're getting really good at that, WordPress is super powerful and really, really useful. But sometimes there are some limitations and some ceilings that you run into. And it can be tricky to try to navigate around those things. Now, if you're familiar with using Gatsby, you've probably set up a website and styled it and designed it and figured out all those sorts of solutions. But if you're trying to work with somebody, say like you've got a marketing team or you're doing some freelance work and somebody wants to be able to make changes to the content, but they don't know a ton about or potentially anything about development, this is where something like Contentful comes in handy. So Contentful is it's got a really nice interface for updating content similar to WordPress, but without the sort of design side of things. So I'll show you how all that works, but it's got a really clean interface where people can upload images and text and all sorts of things like that to update the content of a website while you can still have the control and the customization and the power of something like Gatsby. So let's go ahead and dive in. I've got a new Gatsby project here. I've called it Contentful. So the only step that you missed is me doing this, hitting enter, and then changing into that directory. So if you need to pause for a second and do that, go ahead. So we're using the default starter, the Gatsby default starter. So when you run Gatsby new, it'll pull from that starter, and here's what we get. Let's first take a look at our package.json. We can see all of the different dependencies that come installed. Now, if you're somebody that doesn't need all of this stuff, I might recommend either starting from scratch or you could even potentially use the Hello World Gatsby starter. So if you just search Gatsby starters or Gatsby starter Hello World or whatever Gatsby starter that you are looking to use, there are different options for how you can set things up. They even have a Gatsby Contentful starter that'll get you set up with the dependencies that you need right out of the box. But if you're not worried about any of that stuff, then Gatsby new and then whatever the name of your project is totally fine for these purposes. So I like to start out these videos by getting some of the setup out of the way early. So let's go ahead and install a couple of dependencies that we're going to be using. So you can do npm install if you want. I'm going to do yarn add. We're going to use .env. I'm going to do Gatsby plugin, or sorry, Gatsby source, contentful, and then slash, and that should be all we need for now. Now, if you saw, I've got another video about how to set up Tailwind with Gatsby. I love Tailwind, and they recently came up with an update that allows you now to use grid and transitions and transforms. So an already awesome library got even more awesome recently. So if you want to learn how to set that up, go check out that video. Otherwise, you're totally fine just using plain old CSS. And Gatsby's documentation is great if you're more into using Sass or one of the CSS and JS solutions like styled components or emotion. So anyway, now that we've got those dependencies installed, we can close down package.json. And then we're going to go into our Gatsby config. And at the top, I actually had this typed in already. This does not come in, so I'll delete that just so you can see me type it in. So this is actually what you start with. So we're going to require in .env. And what that allows us to do is reference some of our variables that we're going to be using with Contentful. So we'll do path and then .env. And then hit save. So again, we're going to create a .env file, which is going to store our access token and space ID, which I'll show you what those are in a minute when we start with Contentful setup. But those are just bits of information that Gatsby needs to connect with Contentful to pull down the information that you're sending to it. So we did install Gatsby source Contentful. Let's go ahead and add that to our plugins array. So we can add an object that says resolve. And then Gatsby, and I'm using backticks here, Gatsby source Contentful. And then options is an object that takes in two options. One is the space ID, which we haven't gotten yet, but it is going to be accessed at process.env.gatsby, and this is all capitals, underscore contentful, underscore space, underscore ID. And then the second piece is the access token, process.env.gatsby contentful access token. All right, so again, we have not made these yet. We are going to make them in a .env file. So let's go ahead and make that file right now. We can save this and then create a new file in the root called .env. It looks like I already made one. If you don't have .env, then just do new file and then .env. And it should just be a blank file like this. And then it's good practice to make sure before you make any commits to check your git ignore. So this default starter comes with a git ignore. If you don't have one, make sure that you make one. And two really big things to make sure that you don't commit. Node modules, just because it's going to take forever and it's going to upload all of your node modules to GitHub, which it doesn't need. These node modules will be say, for example, you push this repo up and then somebody wanted to collaborate with you. When they pull it down to their machine locally and then hit npm install or yarn, then that'll look at all the dependencies in your package.json and it'll generate that node modules file, or folder. So point being, you don't need to commit it. But the big thing that we're looking for is our .env. We want to make sure that .env is not published publicly to our repo. So now that that is there, that's great. If you don't have that there, then just go ahead and add it. If you don't have git ignore, just new file and then .git ignore, and then make sure you add at least .env and node modules. Okay, so we've got some setup going. Let's go ahead over to Contentful. So I just signed up for a new account. You can sign up with GitHub or Gmail or whatever. And once you're through with the sign up, then it'll pop you onto this example space, example project space. So we don't actually need this one. If we go to general settings and then just remove space and all its contents, and we'll type in the example project and hit remove, then we're good to go. So with the free tier of Contentful, you have two spaces that you can work with. We're just going to make one, but figured I'd show you how to remove that just in case you're looking to make a few, or I guess another space once we're finished with this video. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be operating under the assumption that we're working with a local youth sports league, and we're just populating some information about like teams and what sports they play and their ages and that kind of stuff. And so we'll just make up some kind of dummy information just so you get the idea of what this looks like. But if you are looking for freelance ideas, probably not a bad place to start. If you look at some of your local youth sports league websites, like some of them are good, some of them are not as good. And so like, even if you're just starting out and you're trying to build up your portfolio, you could reach out and ask folks to do it for free. You could ask for a couple $100, whatever it is, but that might be a good place to start. So we can go ahead and add a space. So notice that, you can pay. We're gonna do free, and we'll create an empty space called team, or I guess teams is the space, and then we'll create it. And here's our teams space. So this is where we're going to house all of our information about different teams. So let's go ahead into our content model. So this is going to be, we're not adding any specific information here. The content model is, how is the data going to be shaped? What information do we need from each like individual team, for example? So we'll add this content type and we'll call it team singular, and we can hit create. And now let's add some fields. So the first thing that we're going to do is add a text field and call it slug. That's the field ID. And we can create this one. And let's double check in settings real quick. And go ahead and check this field represents the entry title. So what that'll do for us is our slug is just going to be like, whatever.com/Cubs, whatever.com/Astros. The slug will serve a dual purpose of being the target for like the URL for seeing the information about that team, as well as the name of the actual like little team unit here in Contentful. So we can hit save, and let's add a couple more fields. So let's add, let's do a Boolean, and let's do T-ball. And that'll be just true or false if it's T-ball. Let's do co-ed as a Boolean as well. And then let's do number, and we can do number of players. And that'll just be an integer. You could do a decimal for other bits of information if you wanted. And then let's do a JSON object, and we'll do team info, and we'll do one more. Let's do text, and we can do a list, and let's do coaches. Cool. Now, if you wanted to mess around with some other stuff, definitely dive in, break stuff, get frustrated, overcome that frustration, feel super powerful. That's what development's all about. But lots of flexibility here with Contentful and the fields that you're able to use. So now that we've got some fields, let's go ahead and hop into content. So this is where, I gotta hit save, and saves in that top right too if you are on a wider screen. So now we can actually add individual teams. So we've got our data structure. Let's go ahead and add a team. So a slug, let's do Cubs We'll say no, they're not T-ball. Yes, they're co-ed. And we'll say there's 12 players. And let's say team info, we'll say their name is the Cubs. Let's say the sport is baseball. And let's say the league that they're in is Mustang. And then coaches will say Coach Julie and hit enter. And notice now I've got that bit of information. Let's say Coach Dan. That sounds fine for now. Cool. So one thing I want to keep track of is this team info here. So I'm actually going to copy that. I'm going to hit publish. And now the Cubs were published successfully. Awesome. So now let's go back. And now we've got the Cubs here, and let's add a new team. And let's do Cowboys. T-ball, no. Co-ed, yes. Number of players, 25. I'm going to paste in that information from before, and now I'm just going to update it. So I'll say Cowboys, say football, and I'll say, let's say pony, I know is usually for baseball. Then coaches, we'll say Coach Ron, Coach, let's capitalize Ron, give him some respect there. Ron, let's do Coach Colleen, and let's do Coach Jeremy. How about? Awesome. All right, so now in our space we've got two teams. Next thing what we want to do is get our space ID and our access token. So remember in our Gatsby config, those are the two bits of information that Gatsby source Contentful needs. So let's go to settings and go to API keys. We can click on this example key here. And you can update the name if you want to. Let's get our space ID and copy it. Go to our .env file and paste it. And since it's the space ID that we're looking for, let's copy Gatsby Contentful space ID. Go to the beginning of that line, paste it, and then put equals. So it should be Gatsby Contentful space ID equals the space ID that you see here. And then we're going to use the content delivery API access token. You can see here the preview API says preview unpublished content using this API. So if you're just testing stuff out and you're in a dev environment and you don't want to publish it, then you can use this API. But we're going to use the content delivery for this. So I copied it. Give it some space. I'll hit paste. And then we'll do the same thing. We'll grab that variable name, Gatsby Contentful access token. Go to the beginning, paste it, hit equals. Cool. So there we go. And let's see, this should be working now, at least as far as pulling the data. So let's go ahead and do Gatsby develop. And this is always the point where it's like, all right, fingers crossed. I think I have everything set up. If I really run into a wall, I'll pause it and then figure it out and start it back up. But if it's just like a small little hiccup, I usually like to leave those in the video just so you can see that like development is not a perfect process. And a lot of times you do have to troubleshoot. All right, so what we're actually looking for is this GraphQL link. So I just clicked on it. All right, so this is a good sign. So we're getting all Contentful content type, all Contentful team. Awesome. All right, so let's take a look. And let's open up an object for our query. And then I'm going to hit Control Space. I think it's Command Space on a Mac, and it'll show you all of the options. So let's do all Contentful team. Whenever it gives you a red line, usually what that means, and you can see the error message there. All Contentful team must have a selection of subfields. So what that means is it's still looking for stuff to query underneath. So I'll open up another object, Control Space. Let's do edges. And then node. And so what edges node gives us is access to the individual pieces of data. Or in other words, if I go back to content, each of these cowboys and cubs, each one is a node. So then if I go to node, now I should start to see the information that we have. So slug, t-ball, co-ed, number of players, coaches, and I think we had one more, team info. Yep. And then in team info, remember it's giving us this message because team info was a JSON object that had name, sport, and league. And now if we hit play, there's all that information. So I like to actually leave this open in another tab. I'm not one of those like let's have 50 tabs open sort of people, but I do like to have some just so I can envision the object structure that GraphQL is supplying me with. So you can see we've got our Cowboys information, we've got our Cubs information. So we're looking really good so far. So now, how do we get this information into Gatsby? So what we're actually going to do first is we're going to create a template. So in the root, we're going to create a new folder called templates. And then inside of that templates folder, we'll create a new file and we'll call it team.js. And so inside of that, we're going to import React from React. We are going to import, we're not going to need it yet, but we will in a little bit, GraphQL from Gatsby. And then we can do const team equals, we're going to destructure out our data, which we'll get a little bit later. And then we will return, for now, we can just make it a div with an h1 that says team page, and then like a little paragraph that says team information, and then we can export default team and hit save. So we have a template now. So one of the awesome things about Contentful and with Gatsby is we have access to the Gatsby node API. And so if you used another starter, or if you use another one that doesn't come with Gatsby node, that's fine. All you have to do is in the root of your directory, just make a new file and call it gatsby-node.js. And why it's so powerful is we can use this information to automatically use this template to generate pages. So let's take a look at how that all kind of goes down. So at the top, we're going to do const path equals require path. And then const slash equals require slash. Then we're going to use create pages. And it's going to take in GraphQL and actions. And once we build this out, what it's going to do is it's going to pull this information, and based on the slug that we give it, it's going to use the team template to automatically create a page for you. And then anytime you add a new team, which I'll show you once we're done here, it's going to create a new new page at that slug, which is pretty nice. So const create page is equal to actions. And then we're going to return GraphQL. And we're going to query. I got backticks there. All contentful team I'm getting from here. In there, edges. And then node. And then slug. So this is going to query this data just in the same way, like I'll show you. I'll get rid of this. It is going to be this query here. And this is the information that we're pulling into this Gatsby node. Then, so we're going to take the result. And if there are errors, we'll just, for now, we'll just console log them. And we'll say error with contentful data. And then we'll actually show what the errors are. That way we can see them. And now what we'll do is we'll point this to our template. So we'll say const team template equals path dot resolve, and then dot slash. So we're, since Gatsby node, we're in the same like we're in the root directory. So we'll do dot slash source slash templates slash team dot JS. So we're making reference to that path and we're storing it as a variable. And then from this result here, so if there's an error, we'll figure that out. If not, then we're going to take that result, take the data from it, and then all contentful team dot edges dot node, or excuse me, not dot node yet, so dot edges. So what we're doing is this edges here, you can see here is an array of nodes. And so if you are familiar with JavaScript, you probably at this point are familiar with using map and for each and different array methods. And so what we'll do is we'll utilize for each. So edges dot for each. So now we're accessing this edges array and doing something to each item, each object inside of it. And so for each, we'll call them each team. We will create a page, and this page needs a couple of arguments. So the path is going to be whatever path we want to give it. So let's do backticks. And so this will be like from your root domain. So if your thing was like austinlittleleague.com, then this address would be austinlittleleague.com/teams/ and then we'll do team. So we're getting this individual team from the edges .node. So now from this edge, we're accessing the node, and then continuing to use dot notation, we'll access the slug. So team.node.slug. And then we can put a slash there. So it'll be Austin Little League /teams /Cowboys or /Cubs. The component that this information is going to be sent to is our team template. So we'll do slash and then team template. You could just do slash and then dot slash like all this. Just a little bit cleaner to store it in a variable and then pass it down. But it's up to you. And then the context. So this is going to be like, how does the page know what like the rest of the information is that it should be able to access? So context, the slug is our team.node.slug. So just like we did here, the path and the slug are going to be the same. All right, so we have our dot then, and then we'll catch any errors at the end here, and we'll do error, and we'll do the same error handling where we console.log error with contentful data, and then whatever the error is. And there we should be good to go with our Gatsby node. So again, this is taking all the behind the scenes stuff. It's accessing our information based on whatever the slug is, and then it's going to pull in the rest of that information based on what we are about to do in team. So let me see. I think we should actually be able to kind of test this out. If we go to localhost 8000, Contentful fixed error in your GraphQL query. Let's see. So we might need to do a few more things first before we can generate this. I think we actually need to give the context to our template before we can actually do anything. Yeah, because it's looking, I think because it's looking for some data and it's not getting any. So let's go ahead and knock that out now. So give me a second, just taking a look at notes here. All right, so beneath our team, we need one other thing. We need, let's see. Oh, no, I think we're good. So at the bottom, we're going to export a const page query equals GraphQL backticks, and then our query. So this is actually going to be taking in a variable, and we mark variables with a $sign in GraphQL. And all this is saying is, hey, there's a variable called slug, and it should be a string. And then what we'll do is we can grab all of that information that we had before. So let me go back into my graphical. I just Control-Z'd to pull back the query from before. And so then what we can do is we can say, so let's look here. So this is all Contentful team. What we want is just Contentful team. We want to pull, so let me get rid of this. We want to, oh geez. We want to pull individual information about individual like specific teams. And so this is like how we're going to do it. So Contentful team, we're going to do, no, not the slug. The slug equals, for example, Cubs. And then we can do the slug, and I'll just show you what this looks like. So now instead of all Contentful teams, we have the single Contentful team where the slug equals Cubs, and notice that it's just this actual individual team. And if we did with Cowboys, it would be the same thing. And if we misspelled it, it'd be null. So what we're saying is in here, there's going to be a variable called slug, which is going to be a string, which we see here. And we'll do Contentful team. And we can actually rename this. So let's just call it team. And then colon. And now when we access this data, it'll be a little bit more manageable, a little bit less typing. And we'll do the slug. And now instead of hard coding it equals Cowboys, we'll do equals whatever's being passed down in that slug. And then we can get the rest of the information that we want. So we want the we want T-ball, we want co-ed, we want the coaches array, we want the team info with the name, sport, and league. And I think that was everything. Did we have anything else? Oh, number of players. Cool. So we should pull all this information. So now what we can do is, there's the slug. And notice that it's highlighting the bracket for me. So I'm just going to copy from here up to slug. Copy. And then here, I'll hit paste. And autosave formats it nicely for me. And so now what I can do is I should be able to say here data.team. So this data is referring to this data here. So data.team. If I didn't put this team here, then I would have to put Contentful team instead of team, but by renaming it, I made it a little bit shorter. So data.team dot, and then let's do team info here, and then dot name, and then this paragraph will do data.team team info dot sport. And hit save. And now let's see if we get anything at slash, what did we say? Our slash teams slash whatever the slug is. So slash teams slash Cubs. All right, Contentful fixed. Let's see where this is going on here. Unknown type, Contentful fixed. All right, so looking at our Gatsby source Contentful, that looks fine. Our .env file looks fine. Let's see, all Contentful team, edges node, team template. Sometimes what we need to do, so let's go ahead. I'm going to shut this down, and I'm going to do Gatsby develop one more time. Sometimes when you're working with GraphQL and Gatsby, you need to restart your server. Let's see. The path to the missing component. Page object path. Let's see. Team/Cowboys. source templates team.js. All right. Your site's Gatsby Node.js created a page with a component that doesn't exist. All right. So we are in, oh, okay, I see why. Because I did /source and then templates, and this template should actually be, that was my fault, inside of source. So now source templates, now that moved, and let's see if I do it again. And then run Gatsby develop one more time. And then let's refresh this page. Man, all right, let's see. Contentful fixed. I wish I knew where this was coming from. All right, and we're back. So after doing a little bit of digging, it turns out I guess a couple of people have been experiencing this error, and some people were suggesting deleting node modules and things like that. But the one suggestion that I saw that worked was going into, so if we were in content, or if you're in content model, if you go to media and hit, so down here, like if you didn't have anything, and hit add asset. If you just have some sort of placeholder image that you can add, so you give it a title, you upload your file, and then here it should say publish for you. I've already published mine. If you publish it and then Control-C or kill your terminal, shut down the server, and then restart it, then that seemed to do the trick. I'm not exactly sure why that happened, but there you go. So let's check it out. So this is our home page. And now if we go to /teams/Cubs, there it is. Cubs, baseball, /Cowboys, Cowboys, football. It looks hideous, but whatever. It's pulling the information that we want. If you wanted, since we've queried this data, if you wanted to do, let's say let's do another div here, and let's do data.team.coaches.map, and then for each coach, we return a paragraph tag with the coach. Then that will populate the coach names. Here, let's give this a style real quick of display flex, and then let's do justify content center and align items center, and then let's do flex direction, and we'll do column. All right, cool. So still looks pretty hideous, but a little bit better, just to give us a little bit of breathing room there. Awesome. And then if we went to Cubs, cool. We've got the name, the sport, and the coaches there. So you can play around with all of that data and populate it as you will, which is pretty cool. And then here's the cool thing, or I guess even cooler thing, is now let's say, so we have our two teams, and now let's say we want to add one more, and let's say so we have football, we have baseball, let's do basketball, and we can say the Pistons. That's unlikely to offend anybody. No, they're not T-ball. Yes, they're co-ed. They've got 10 players. Their team info needs a name, which is Pistons. Yeah, come on. There we go. Pistons. The sport is basketball. And the league is a G, we'll call it, and this should be sport, singular. And then the coaches, LeBron is coaching, taking some time off from the lake show. And then let's do Coach Eric, and then Coach Ashley, and then publish that. And so now it's likely that you'll have to restart your server, but let's check it out and see if it works. So Pistons doesn't work, but now if I shut it down and then do another Gatsby develop, it'll fire everything up for us. And now if we refresh this page, boom, now we've got our new page generated for us simply by shutting down the server and then starting it back up. So pretty nice. So now what we'll do, I'm going to leave it there because, you know, you can take it for what you will with styling and that sort of stuff. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new repository so that we can push this to Netlify so that it can get hosted. So we'll do git init. And then I'm going to go to my GitHub repo. If you're full screen, you'll probably see a little plus here. If not, you'll do new. And we'll do Gatsby Contentful Little League. We'll make this public. Create the repository, and then we'll just follow this stuff. So we did git init. We can do git add dot to add everything. And then git commit -m first commit. And then we'll copy all this. And then we'll do git push -u origin master. And for this step, if you don't have SSH set up, the HTTPS is fine. Just make sure you have one or the other, depending on what your GitHub setup is. And now if I refresh this, cool. So I've got all that information. And notice the .env is not set up on here. So that information is private. And if we go to Gatsby config, you can see that it's got those variables. Cool. So now if we head over to Netlify, I've got some other projects here. I'm going to click on new site from Git. And notice that it can do this if you use GitLab or Bitbucket. Those will work as well. And it'll check to make sure you're authorized. And then we called it Gatsby Contentful, whatever. I just hit enter. And there it is. And it should auto-populate these build settings. If it didn't for you, that's fine. Just type in Gatsby build and then public / as the publish directory and then deploy site. And it gives you this sweet auto-generated name. If you want to change that, you can go to domain settings and then custom domains. And then the 3 dots, you can do edit site name. And you can delete that and you can call it whatever you want. And then .netlify.com. So while that is building, what we need to do is set up our environment variables, because this pulls from GitHub. But if you remember on GitHub, there is no .env. And so without access to that information, our Contentful polls with GraphQL are going to fail. We're going to get errors because it doesn't know our space ID and our access token. So what we need to do is put this information into Netlify. And Netlify, once again, comes through in the clutch with this. So let's see, we're in build and deploy environment, and you can do edit variables. And all we'll do is just copy these over. So Gatsby Contentful space ID, copy and paste. And then the value, copy and paste. I'll save that, and then I'll add a new variable, Gatsby Contentful access token, paste, and then everything to the right of the equal sign as the value, and I'll hit save. And so now we should be good to go with actually being able to see this site live. So site deploy failed. Let's check this. It might be because it didn't have access to the .env. Let's take a look. Failed during build stage. We see something about env there. Okay, well, you can take a look there. Failed to fetch cache. All right. Well, it's probably because of the .env. So let's go ahead and we can redeploy. So go to deploys and then trigger deploy and deploy site. And so hopefully that was the issue. All right, and we're good to go. You can see site is live. So if we go back to our overview and you click on this link, we've got our silly Galileo, whatever yours is. And if we go to /teams/Cubs, that is live for the world to see, baby. Let's go. So, awesome. So we've got our stuff set up. If you wanted to, I showed you how to customize that. If you wanted to add a custom domain, let's say you somehow owned cubs.com, you could configure your setup to point to Netlify for this, and you would just point it at your netlify.com address. And you could get really deep into all that customization, and then anytime you push any changes, it'll update your website for you. You can also go into Contentful and you can set up hooks that will between Netlify and Contentful. You can set up hooks that anytime you publish new changes, instead of having to go into your project and get pushing it or manually triggering a deploy on Netlify, Contentful and Netlify will work together behind the scenes. Anytime you publish a new team or a new piece of information, it'll automatically publish your new site. So really, really powerful. And I know this was just kind of the tip of the iceberg, but hopefully you got everything set up and see the powerful relationship between Gatsby and Netlify and Contentful. So hope you enjoyed the video. Definitely going to be cranking out some more on Gatsby. I really like using it, and if you're into Gatsby, then come back for more. If you like the video, go ahead and give it a like. If there's something you'd like to see done differently, or you got questions about, or you wanted to point out something that might help out other people, go ahead and leave them in the comments. And then, of course, definitely appreciate any subscriptions if you want to hit subscribe. I'll be cranking more videos out as we go. So thanks a lot for hanging out, and I'll see you in the next one.